Have you ever found yourself eating so quickly and so uncontrollably, even after you realize that you're already full? And you may have even done this in secret or felt guilty and shameful after eating. Well, if you've done this before, then that was probably a binge. And if you feel like it's getting to a point where it's taking over your life, then keep watching because I'm gonna tell you what you really need to know in order to stop binge eating. My name is Mandy, I'm a registered dietitian, and I know exactly what you're going through because I have been there as well. Back when I was on my placement slash internship when I was doing my degree for nutrition and dietetics, I was working as a student dietitian in the hospitals, and every time I would get back from work, I would have no energy to really do anything, and I would basically use this as an excuse to skip a meal because I felt like I needed to lose weight and I wasn't happy with my body. But then I found that whenever I would skip my dinner, my cravings would get so strong later on in the evening that I would end up just binging uncontrollably on any snacks that I had, to the point where I felt so sick and so disgusted with myself. But over time, I learned to let go of this desire to lose weight, this desire to restrict myself and diet, and I noticed that my binging became much less frequent, and now I'm at the point where I have a healthy relationship with food. I no longer binge eat. I feel at peace with food. I no longer think about it all the time, and most importantly, I'm confident and I'm happy with my own body. And during that time, especially since I knew I was going to become a dietitian, like I was literally on my placement as a student dietitian, I felt even more ashamed of this because I was like, how are you going to be a dietitian but you have this eating problem? Like, I felt like there was something wrong with me, but then I've also learned that I wasn't alone, and you are also not alone. In fact, this video was actually inspired by the roasted veggie on YouTube, which I'll link her video down below. It's really useful. She's also a dietitian who struggled with binge eating, so I'm not alone, you're not alone, and like, there's nothing wrong with you. You do not need to feel ashamed or guilty about this. So in order to stop binge eating, you need to understand what the root causes are. So the main root causes of binge eating usually are a poor body image, a need to diet, and also restriction and undereating. So if you feel like you've tried every single thing and you're still binging, then it may be because you haven't actually addressed these root causes. So poor body image and the need to diet are called distal factors in psychology, but I like to call them background causes because this just makes more sense to me. These two things are the background causes of your binge eating. It's what is actually enforcing this cycle to keep happening because of these deeply rooted beliefs that you have. And then the two other main causes, which are restriction and undereating, are what is called proximal factors in psychology, but I like to call this immediate causes because these are the things that kind of cause you to binge eat on a more daily, weekly, or monthly cycle. So in order to truly stop binging, you need to address the background causes and the immediate causes, because if you only address those immediate causes, then you still have that poor body image and that need to diet that's going on in the background that's going to eventually trigger your binge eating again. So in order to address the background root causes of binge eating, which can be poor body image and the need to diet, you need to get rid of your limiting beliefs. You need to reprogram your mind and actually just educate yourself to understand why you really feel this way. Ask yourself why it matters so much that you need to lose weight. Why does it matter so much that you need to look a certain way? And this may seem obvious to you. Maybe it's because you want to fit into some nicer clothes that you have. Maybe you want to look better in pictures, or you just want to get more compliments by other people. But this may all sound good on the outside, and it can be good, but it's not gonna make you truly happy, and I think you know that as well. And it's kind of like money, because everyone knows that being rich is not gonna truly make you happy, and yet everyone wants to find out for themselves anyway. So when I kind of shifted my mindset to see weight loss as this like desire that's not gonna truly make me happy, when I started to see it as something the same as like getting rich, then that's when I realized that like what's the point of even chasing this? The reason why you are doing this is because society has made you believe that you need to shrink yourself in order to be accepted by other people, in order to be liked by other people. But when you learn about diet culture and how it all started in the first place, you'll realize that it's actually rooted in racism and patriarchy. And I learned about this in the book called You Are Not a Before Picture by Alex Light. I'm halfway through it right now, but it's really, really good and really eye-opening and interesting. So go and educate yourself on the history of diet culture, because once you realize that women have almost been brainwashed into chasing this unrealistic standard, then you realize that it's so heartbreaking and you want to get out of it. Like, it genuinely makes me mad, because why did I waste so much of my life trying to change my appearance to fit a beauty standard that's not even realistic, that's not even attainable for most people? Like, I could be doing way better things with my time. God didn't put me on this earth to change my appearance so that I could please other people. Like, there are better things for you in store. There are better things for you to worry about, for you to care about, for you to put your time and energy into, other than worrying about the way that you look. Like, just think about how big the universe is. You know that video where it starts with like the human on the ground and it zooms out to the entire universe? Whenever I watch that, I always think about how the things that I care about so much sometimes, or the things that I find are problems in my life, don't actually really matter, and it really gives me like this whole new perspective on things. So yeah, just watch that video and ask yourself if you really want to waste your time on this earth worrying about your appearance. And I know that this is all kind of just easy to say, but how do you actually get around this? I think the answer is that you need to learn how to validate yourself, because this is what I started to do. And like, after I started doing this, and after I started to give myself validation and accept myself and no longer seek validation from other people, that's when I stopped really caring as much about what other people think of me, and therefore I stopped kind of like living for other people and started living for myself. Because the reason why you care so much in the first place is because you care too much about what other people think, because you want people's validation too much. So when you learn to validate yourself, you no longer need that validation from other people, because you can get it from yourself. You no longer, feel obligated to act a certain way just to please other people, because you know that you yourself, like, you have so much worth and value that what other people think of you is not going to change that. And you need to know that your self-worth doesn't depend on the way that you look. Like, just because you look more like the beauty standard doesn't mean that you have greater self-worth. And the opposite is true. Just because you don't fit the beauty standard doesn't mean that you have low value or low self-worth. It has absolutely nothing to do with your appearance, and you need to really understand that. Because once you truly know this and believe it, then you let go of that desperation to change the way that you look. So start doing affirmations, start hyping yourself up in the mirror. I know it sounds corny, but it freaking works, okay? There are so many affirmation videos out there, so just pick whichever one you resonate with the most and do it consistently. So that's how I personally started to address these background root causes of my binge eating. I started to learn to accept myself and validate myself, and like realize what my own self-worth is outside of the way that I look. And that kind of led me to stop trying to like change the way I look, basically. Now, what about the immediate causes that I talked about earlier? The immediate causes of restriction and undereating. First of all, you may be wondering, how does restriction and undereating actually cause binge eating? Because doesn't that sound kind of counterintuitive? Well, let me explain. So over millions and millions of years of evolution, our human race has developed survival instincts and survival mechanisms. So food is one of our most basic human survival needs. And so when you go for a certain period of time restricting yourself and underfeeding yourself, then your body is going to naturally pick up on that. Like, even though you're trying to convince yourself that you're eating enough, even though you're trying to convince yourself that 1,200 calories is enough, your body knows that it is not enough. Our bodies are so smart because we have these built-in mechanisms to tell us when we're not being fed enough so that we can actually address that. So if you have been dieting for some time now and you have kind of mentally restricted yourself and put certain foods off limits, then it can kind of let your brain seek certain foods even more, because when you put things off limits, your brain actually sees it as more of a reward. So when you actually do get your hands on that food, you end up being more likely to binge on it and to overeat on that specific food, because your brain is like, I'm never going to be able to get the chance to eat this again. So it's going to go all out. That's why you get this like uncontrollable feeling when you binge, because your kind of rational brain is just switched off and your survival brain takes over. So basically, when you put certain foods off limits and you have these food rules that say you can't eat this specific food, and you are restricting yourself and trying to control yourself and prevent yourself from eating it, then your brain will do everything that it can to convince you to have it. But then once you allow yourself to have it, you give yourself permission to have it, you get rid of these food rules, then when you eat it, your brain, initially you might be like, whoa, this is so good, this is the best thing ever, and you might overeat on it. But that's fine, because over time, gradually, when you do really stop restricting yourself with those foods, then your brain will slowly start to learn that, like, hey, actually, this is not like as good as I thought it was. And when you come across that food, you would just be like, like, that's fine, like I can live without it. Think of it as like reverse psychology. Like, you know how when you want something really bad is because you can't have it, but then when you finally have it, you're like, oh, like it's not that deep. So yeah, it's not that you don't have willpower, it's that you've been working against your brain this entire time and not working with it. And probably the one biggest thing that you can do to see the quickest and biggest reduction in the number of times that you binge eat is to eat regularly. So what I did was I started to have 3 meals a day, and I would also plan my snacks. So I would plan 2 to 3 snacks after my meal times, and that way I would not be skipping any meals, because I knew that if I skipped a meal, it would make it way more likely for me to binge eat. And definitely I would plan also a snack after my dinner time, because like if I had something to eat around 6 or 7ish, then I would plan to have something again at like 9ish before bedtime. Otherwise, if you go too long without eating, like if you go more than 4 hours without eating, it's gonna increase your likelihood of binging. So try not to go too long between your meals and your snacks, 4 hours maximum. And you'll find that once you start eating regularly, your body starts to expect food at certain times, and you'll start to again learn about your hunger and fullness cues, and you'll start to be able to eat more intuitively, because you may have heard of like this concept of intuitive eating, but you're like, how do you do that, when you don't even know what hunger feels like anymore because you've gone for so long restricting yourself. So having regular meals, 3 meals a day, 2 to 3 snacks in between. If you want to skip a snack, then skip the one that is after your breakfast. So have breakfast and then snack, lunch, snack, dinner, and then snack. Or if you only want to have 2 snacks, then have it after your lunch and after your dinner. And this is because you don't want to go in the evening without having a snack. Otherwise, binging is usually way more likely to happen late in the evening. This is what kind of worked for me, and I don't want to give specific advice out here because everyone's situation is so different. Like, this advice that I implemented for myself might not work for you. So if you are struggling with this, go and seek actual, professional help from someone. Go and speak to your doctor, look up for help online. I'll link some resources down in the description down below if you're really struggling with this, because watching a YouTube video from someone you don't even know is only gonna get you so far. So like, take what I say with a grain of salt. So yeah, if you notice that it's time for you to eat, don't ignore it. If you notice that you're hungry, don't ignore it, because if you keep ignoring your hunger signals, then you're gonna end up not feeding the body, but you're gonna end up feeding the mind, and that's what you want to avoid. And I know what you must be thinking after all of this. You might be thinking, well, how am I supposed to lose weight if I don't restrict myself from eating the foods that are causing me to gain weight in the first place? Well, you need to go back and watch the beginning of this video where I talk about you having to ask yourself why it's really important for you to lose this weight. But I totally get it. Like, this desire to lose weight is really hard to get rid of, because maybe you just feel that you want to, know what it's like to actually be at this weight that you have in mind. And although I can tell you that it's not going to make you happier, it's not going to, like, it might make you happier temporarily, but it's not going to give you true happiness. Like, I know when I was a teenager and I was like really skinny, and everyone was telling me that I was really skinny, but I could not see it. Like, my body dysmorphia was so bad where I just would not believe anyone. I would look in the mirror and just think that I was fat. And like, if you don't address this, then like losing the weight is actually, like, it might not actually help it. If this binging and restricting cycle is getting to a point where it's like taking over your life and taking up so much of your mental energy, like you're thinking about food all the time, you can't stop worrying about, wondering what's the next thing that you're gonna eat, and wondering and trying to like force yourself to control the amount that you're eating, like, it's just so much to think about, and you don't even have time for anything else. You don't have time, not time, but like, you don't have the mental capacity for anything else. Like, you could be giving all of this energy to your friends, your family, to your studies, to your work, to whatever else that's going on in your life. And your physical and your mental health is way more important than the way that you look. And also, once you start to eat regularly and heal your relationship with food and address all of these root causes of your binge eating, then you're gonna find that your binge eating is going to reduce, and therefore the amount of calories that you're consuming from your binges is going to reduce, and you probably won't even end up gaining weight. Like, I know that now that I'm on the other side of it and I've recovered from my binge eating, I didn't gain any additional weight after, like, from recovering, and like, yeah, I was still able to maintain my weight, and I don't think you have to worry about that. But again, you should ask yourself why this even matters to you in the first place. But that being said, I also want to talk about the two key components that actually allowed me to have the foods that I want, but also not continue to overeat or continue to binge. And those two things are awareness and self-compassion. So I've talked about this in my previous videos before, but you need to increase the amount of awareness that you have when it comes to food. So whenever you get the urge to eat something, ask yourself what's causing it. And when you're able to differentiate between physical hunger and non-physical hunger, it makes it so much easier for you to tackle those urges to eat and to tackle those cravings. And I've made a free craving tool for you, which I will link down below. It has helped me also gain more self-awareness and therefore gain more control when it comes to deciding when and what to eat. Because if you are eating mindlessly and without any self-awareness, then it's more likely that you're gonna overeat. And I have another free resource, which is my free mindful eating guide. If you want to learn more about mindful eating and how you can implement these practices into your daily life, I know that it has helped me so much with getting a better and healthier relationship with food, and also being able to help me really make good decisions when it comes to my eating. And the second key component that has really helped me allow myself to have foods that I want but also not binge eat is to have self-compassion. So I feel like this isn't talked about enough, but this is the key to getting rid of guilt and shame that you have after binge eating, because guilt and shame reinforces the cycle of binge eating even more. Like after you binge eat and you feel guilty and shameful, then we know that these are the lowest frequency of emotions, and not just that, but it's gonna affect your brain in a way that actually makes you more prone to repeat that behavior again. And I learned a lot about this in one of like the Diary of a CEO's podcast videos. I will link it down below again. Really eye-opening, and I do recommend that you watch it. But basically the person in the video talks about how you can use self-compassion and kindness to truly change the way that you eat, change the relationship with food for good, and to eat in a way that feels good to you. So stop blaming yourself, because it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you've been conditioned by society to believe that you need to be skinnier in order to be accepted by people, in order to be loved by people. It's not your fault that you think you need to diet in order to feel like you deserve good things in life. It's not your fault that you have been restricting all of this time. It's not your fault that you have been binge eating. It's not your fault that any of this has happened to you. Like, you need to know that there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. You are not screwed. You are not a lost cause. Just because this has happened does not mean that this is gonna be your life forever. And I know that it's possible to heal your relationship with food, and to heal your eating habits, to find a way of living that is peaceful around food, that you don't have to stress about it, that you don't have to worry about the way that you look, and that you can be confident in your own body. It is possible for everyone. Once again, check out the resources that I've linked down below, and thank you so much for watching. I hope you've learned something from this, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.